Okay, so got it. Why is this still up? Okay, how does that look? Is that full screen?
It
Mary
looks
Beth,
like
I
if
lost
you go to the top left, you can resume your slideshow there. Do you see that little?
I've got it full screen right now.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we
Okay,
can see
good.
it.
All right, so there we go. Let's see how this goes. So it's a very short amount of time. I like to talk for days about printing, so it's you're gonna get the watered down version. So what makes a tree is that it has a trunk and you can see substantial, really large branches. That's what makes it a tree. So behind this tree, well, the tree you can see barely the trunk and some of these scaffold limbs, the structural limbs. Behind it are some plants that you don't see that, and they just look like shrubs. They're probably, some of those are the same size. Obviously, the one pine-looking thing in the back is a tree, but trees normally come with a trunk and some strong branches, and that makes it a tree, not a shrub.
Juan, this is Mary Beth. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we are still seeing your very first slide and not the plants that you're talking about.
Okay. How about now? Same?
Nope, same thing.
Okay, let's go. I'm not sure. I've got
Can you push your right arrow or down arrow to see if that will do it on your keyboard? Okay, now we're on slide number 3, the benefits of trees.
Yes. Is it full screen for you?
No.
No, not quite.
Okay, so when I click on full screen.
Well, you need to click on slideshow.
Slideshow, I think slideshow, yeah. There you go.
Okay, there we go. All right,
Perfect.
now maybe we're working. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so a tree has a trunk and it has got strong branches. I just wanted to go real fast. A lot of stuff I'm going to give you has some text with it, not too much, but a lot of text. So this is one of the places we're going to go through real fast. Just want to make sure you know that the trees do have certain benefits, environmental, social, health benefits and economic values are really promoted now. They've got better means of determining the value of trees. One of the things we have, did you get that slide change? Yeah, okay, good. One of the things we have is called a tree benefits calculator, and there's the website if you want to write that down real fast. With this calculator, you can enter your zip code and then enter the tree species, the trunk diameter, and the zone that we live in. We live in zone 9. It's the not the sunset zones, but we're in zone 9. And so if you enter that, then you get a calculator benefits. And so this is based on a 26-inch Arizona sycamore, and that's all you have to push in with the zip code, and then it comes up with the benefit this year of $262. When the tree smaller, it has less benefits because it's not as much, doesn't provide as many benefits. But you can see at the bottom of the page, if the tree is cared for and grows to 31 inches, it will provide $143 worth of annual benefits. You say, what the heck is going on there? Well, we know that as trees mature, they also start to decline. So so they've worked out a lot of values, and so you can figure out through the life of the tree, the values. And and there are different calculations for stormwater, electricity, and so forth and so on. This is a very nice way real simple way to real fast decide if you have what kind of benefits your tree provides for you. Some of the characteristics of the trees are, let's get this out of the way. For natural trees, the forms that I show you there are pretty much what landscape architects are thinking about or designers think about when they're putting a tree in our ground. Most of our trees, we don't have a lot of trees that fill out these different kind of forms. For instance, the open form, that's more like a maple, and we have very few trees that grow like that. But in general, we have round trees or spreading trees, and we have upright trees, more like a pine-shaped tree. So those are the general thing. Most trees start out very upright, like the columnar shape, and then they can spread to become more like a oak tree shape or like a Aleppo pine. So and our mesquite trees are spreading, our palo verdes are spreading. So we think of those different characteristics when we select trees, the form of the tree and the function of the tree. Okay, let's see. Why isn't this? Why aren't we advancing? We should be advancing. There we go. Okay, real fast. Before you prune, you need to have a reason. That's mandatory for everybody. Just don't go out and prune because it's springtime. But why are you pruning? So these are some of the, not all, but there are some of the reasons why we do prune. So for arborists, we prune to reduce the top four are the top, or the most basic ones. We prune to reduce risk, maintain health, develop structure, and improve appearance. But we also do some other pruning. So we may prune a tree to reduce the size or change the shape if they're off balance. We do clearance so they don't touch buildings or walls or too low on the sidewalks or streets. We might remove part of the tree to provide views. We do prune for production. And I'm not going to talk about fruit trees tonight. Obviously, that's a huge subject, but production of flowers or fruits, we do prune for that as well. And then restoration is something that's just coming into vogue here in the United States. It wasn't so much until recently because when trees here have trouble, we just get rid of them. But now we're doing restoration pruning. So this is a little bit of a list about pruning young trees for their structural integrity. And that's one of the main things. So remember the top two reasons to prune were both to do with structure. Risk and structure go hand in hand. So we prune young trees to provide structure as they get older. One of the things, so we start out with trying to select a central leader, which is difficult on some of our desert trees because they don't want to develop a central leader. But that is the strongest shape. So if you see it, if you look at the sketch to the right of the screen, that's a strong central leader, and that's what we want to provide for our tree as long as we can. So even with our desert trees, we try to go to a strong central leader and not let the laterals take over. After we find a leader, we look for the permanent branches, which we call a scaffold. But the permanent branches are the ones that we think are going to be there for the life of the tree unless something happens. Those are the ones we select. We don't leave it up to nature because sometimes nature doesn't make the right choice. So we try to select the permanent branches. Anything that's not permanent is a temporary branch. So it only lists them here on the bottom of the tree. Those are temporary branches below the first permanent one. And but there are temporary branches up through the tree. And so later on, we will remove temporary branches and just have the permanent branches with laterals on them, secondary and tertiary branches coming off the scaffold limbs. So after, and we have difficulty because this is a single stem plant. A lot of our trees are multi-stemmed, and we have codominant plants. A lot of our desert trees are codominant. They give us trouble pruning. So we try to incorporate these common pruning practice to do well with our desert type plants. What happened? We went the wrong way. We're going the wrong way. What's going on here? There.
There you go.
Darn, I don't know what's going on there, but okay. So in establishing a strong structural, a strong scaffold, we're trying to improve the structure of the tree, and that will make them less likely to break. With major trees, the structure is extremely important because we don't want them failing. We don't want large branches falling off and striking property or persons. and we don't want whole tree failure. If a small shrub was to fall, it's not as big a deal because they have branches clear to the ground. They just don't do anything unless they're a tumbleweed, then they roll away. But trees can be very dangerous, so we try to make a strong scaffold. Even small trees can be painful, but so it's our goal is to train them when they're young and have a strong structure. And again, a strong central leader is the best way to do it. I don't know of many mesquite trees that look like that, or hackberries or palo verdes. We have a lot of difficulty pruning our desert trees. They don't cooperate. But good arboriculture takes away the weak branches and leaves the structurally strong branches. One of the most important things is trying to realize when you have a young tree what the first permanent branch is going to be. This is the first permanent. This is the branches that we're looking at keeping forever. And the reason I call it first permanent, we don't want to come later when this branch is large and remove it. We don't want to cut it off when it's got a 5-inch diameter or 14-inch diameter. So mesquite trees near streets are very difficult to deal with because mesquite tree branches are very limber, and you think you've got it set just right, and then they come down, and then you have to remove them because they're growing into the street. But finding the first permanent branch is the one that we're not going to cut later, and that means we don't have to make large cuts. Large cuts are the bane of our of our tree care. If we can keep it to smaller cuts, we're really doing better for our trees. Another just to make sure that we understand. By the way, I'm going through this a little bit differently. I've decided to talk about what we're doing rather than how. So later on, we'll talk about how to make a pruning cut. But I want to talk about what we're doing. So this is a mulberry tree. You can see where the lowest permanent branch, there's two of them that are opposite each other. So those were selected or left in place when they grew these trees. One of the things we want to do is to make sure in that section it says developing branch structure. We want to make branches that are attached to the leader that are only about a half the size of the diameter of the trunk. So that lowest large branch on the left side of the tree is more than half of the diameter. So that branch should have possibly been not removed, but at least slowed down. And the way you slow branches down, so the way you make this so it doesn't grow larger in girth is to take off some of the leaves, because the leaves feed this branch. They give strength, girth, and size to this branch. The more foliage you have, the more girth you have. It's not, I mean, it's possible, but it's not as prevalent for sugars to come out of this side of the tree and come into this part of the branch. That just doesn't happen. They go to where the sinks are. So the sugars could leave here and go to these leaves, but they're not going to go here to this part of the branch. That gets girth from these leaves. So if you want to slow this down, when it was younger, should have removed some of these branches, some of these leaves, and with less leaves, it would not have as much growth. Okay. This is a good common sense thing. We want to, when we grow our trees, we want to raise them only to about a third of the height of the tree. We don't want to raise them any higher than that. Doesn't mean you have to raise them to a third, but we don't want to raise them and to 50% or more in the case of some of the like shopping center trees where they're raised abnormally. That's a really hard thing to do when you raise trees that high. Our trees in the desert are very often multi-trunk trees. They more often mimic the natural trees in our desert, and they like I was talking with shrubs. They're more resistant to wind throw. They don't blow over as easily. They don't fall down as fast. So that could be important if you have concerns about risk. So the palo verde to the right has been pruned in an upright form, and we have to have them upright. Even that's a tree that likes to be spreading. It's a tree that we frequently prune up so we can have access to the under canopy. Okay, so this is just an example of some single trunk trees. I also put in here for you, if you don't have it already, some of the names of some of our trees have changed. A lot of the acacias have changed. And for instance, sweet acacia, that the tree in the bottom left is a sweet acacia. That is no longer an acacia. Acacias are trees that come from Australia. Our acacias here are no longer acacias. Some of them are Vachelia, and that's what sweet acacia is now, Vachelia. And some of the other names have changed with Palo Verdes, and yeah, for the most part, those are the big ones for us, at least for arborists. So multiple trunk trees can be very handsome. We don't find them very often in other parts of the country. This is not desirable in most of the United States. This is more desirable a single trunk, a standard trunk that with upright growing branches. And the Southwest deserts, we have more spreading and multi-trunk style of trees. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work we do, and we don't have this style of we don't have these styles of printing in our standards anymore. They've taken them out because we're more directed towards the objectives now. So I showed you the reasons we prune, but then we develop, as arborists, we develop objectives. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to make clearance. We don't just crown raise a tree. We call it clearance, or street clearance or sidewalk clearance. So we've gotten away from some of these terms, and we just do what the objective is to clear a sidewalk or clear the street or clear a house. So that's why we look at it now, a little bit different. And it's important for professionals to do that. But crown raising is something that is frequently done. We want to keep most of the foliage intact at the 2/3 of the crown at least. It could be more, but the branches growing down would be what we would sever. So we were obviously, well, I don't know, it may not be obvious, but basal sprouts or basal suckers, something coming from like the bottom foot of the trunk or coming off the roots, are things that we should clear as soon as they appear. When they're young, they take more energy than they provide to the tree. After they grow larger, they start putting energy back into the tree. But when they're younger, they just take energy away. So we try not to let them pull off much. We want to keep the energy going to the majority of the canopy. The bottom bullet point there, raising has the greatest negative effect on tree structure and storm preparedness. And that's true. There's been a lot of studies done. There's been a lot of very interesting research, and it shows that if you lift trees too high, if you take the lower branches off and make them taller, that you're actually doing the worst thing as far as getting them, you're improving the chances of them falling over more than the different kinds of prunings. So, oops, now what? Okay, here we go. There we go. So these trees, these are sisu trees in Phoenix area, and they're just been pruned a little bit higher than they probably should. So I just want to show this. It's a little bit more clearance than they probably should have had. They could have been left a bit lower, but businesses often prune up trees so they can show their signage, or they can show their window fronts or whatever. So frequently you'll see businesses along streets over pruning their trees, over raising them. Crown thinning is something we've always promoted. Crown thinning, a lot of arboriculture came from the orchard industry. So people that had tree or pear orchards, so forth, were the ones that we over 100 years ago started going to find out information about how to prune trees. Well, orchard trees, fruit trees, are different than shade trees. So a lot of the work we've done over the last century has been to thin trees and take out the inner branches, which is important for fruit production, but not for shade. So we're getting away from that. This is would be an example of thinning. All the red ink marks are where you would sever a branch and remove it. But we don't promote that as much as we used to. in fact, to the point that there's some thinned pine trees. They're also in the Phoenix area. So if you know pine trees, you can see through this one. You can notice it has been thinned out, and arborists do that for beauty, appearance, but also to try to help with reducing damage in storms. And the truth of the matter is, arborists aren't really good at identifying the problems. So that we sometimes make it worse by the work we do and by over thinning, and we cause branches to break because we're trying to do the right thing, and we actually make it worse. So these trees have been what you would call thinned. I think you would agree with me. They don't look exactly like pine trees, but this is not bad. I don't think this is overly done. That is a problem, but this is not. But thinning has become such a problem for our industry that we don't call it thinning anymore. We call it branch removal. They've taken thinning out of our standard. We still talk about it with the clients. We still know what the concept is, but because it's been done wrong so long, we have actually taken that word out of our vocabulary. We talk about branch removal because that's exactly what you're doing. They're removing the smaller of two branches at a union. That's branch removal. Without cutting into the branch bark ridge or the branch collar. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Don't want a branch bark collar or branch bark ridge, or to leave a stub. The bottom point there about don't remove more than a quarter of the living crown, and remove more over successive years. Arboriculture can't be done in one visit, and it doesn't last. So it's a longevity thing. You really shouldn't look at it as this is what you're going to do, and it's going to be one time only for however long you think it's going to last. It just doesn't work. So we try not to take too much off, but we've removed that that wording about a quarter or 25% or 35 or whatever percent of the tree, because people will see that and they think, well, that's where I should take off that much. I should take off a quarter. And so they over prune often because they're trying to reach that quarter. Or some people still remember the old standard about 30% or a third of the tree. They try to reach that, and it's not necessary. What we try to do now is reach the objective. What is the objective? And the objective could be to take out some density of a tree. It could be to improve the shape. So the objective on these trees might be to take out this density in this area here. We don't need to prune down here. We don't need to prune this tree at all. The objective might be to shape it a little bit. We'd cut off pieces like this to make a better shape. And that would be our objective. That's nowhere near 25%. That may be all we need to do. So we're looking at objectives now rather than 25%. It just doesn't work for us as arborists. Reduction has become more of the go-to type of pruning. This is an extreme example. This shows the wires, and this is the way reduction has historically been done, is just to shorten trees because they're getting into the wires. But reduction could be started much younger in this tree's life. It could be done on the sides rather than just the top. But reduction is the preferred structural pruning method. It has been proven that this is the best way to prepare trees for storms. It's better than branch removal or thinning, and it's certainly better than raising trees to prepare trees for storms. This is the preferred method. You need to consider the trees, a lot of things about the tree, but I mean, how easy do you want it, right? Gotta have some difficulties. So cuts are made at lateral branches, and the largest part of the branch is removed. So if you see where those cuts are, some of those cuts are on the right, on the left side over here are removal cuts. So this is a branch and it's removed. This is a branch that's being removed. This branch, however, is retained and the leader is removed. So this is a reduction cut. This branch is larger than the branch you're leaving. This is a reduction cut. okay, reduction cut. If the leader is larger than if the leader is what you take off and it's larger than what you remove, then you're making a reduction cut. These are not reduction. Well, this one is, but these are branch removal cuts. They're branches. This is absolutely is a reduction cut. And you could do this when the tree's much younger. This is a pretty stark depiction, but you could do this when the tree's a lot younger and keep it the crown at a smaller height. And that's what's intended to do, is to reduce the growth of trees. Crown reduction. I take care of a lot of old and mature trees, and they're smaller after I've been working on it for 20 years because I keep cutting off big branches, but they're still here. So big cottonwoods, which are prone to branch loss and failure, they're huge cottonwoods, are still here because we reduce those long heavy laterals and keep the tree together. This is not supposed to be here yet. You're supposed to see. Oh, I'm sorry, we're still on crown reduction. So this tree has been this is a reduction. This is old style, old school. This is a heading cuts. The heading is not a prescribed pruning method. We do heading cuts, but we don't do topping cuts. So they raise this part and then they top this part. And so we have a nice, real dense canopy here. It's very high. So this tree's in jeopardy of falling on cars in the next storm or so. We've also got some problem with two branches of the same size. This is called codominance. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But codominant branches are very hazardous. They're a flaw when two branches of the same size. Two branches of the same size and close together are increase the danger or the defect. So this tree's got a lot of problems, and it could become a liability. Real briefly about tree health. Pruning trees doesn't make them healthier. It takes away leaves, which puts them on a diet. So pruning trees, there's very little we can do to improve the health. Now, mistletoe is something we can remove. That's a parasite. And if it's a health issue, we take that off, that's fine. A lot of times we actually make the health of the tree worse. So this palo verde tree at the bottom was had a large branch that came off. I can't remember which one of these came off. But anyway, one came off, and now the tree's in bright sunlight. So very often the pruning we do, opening trees up, thinning them, and so forth, subjects to excessive amount of sun. So it's not good. A lot of things we do. So pruning trees for health is not really a viable function. It does put them on a diet. It takes the food away. The leaves go away. The food goes away. But it doesn't make them healthy to prune them. It makes them structurally sound. That's why we prune. We make them sound and with structurally, and then they don't break. And that's good for our trees. So these are health issues. These are this is a palo verde tree that got topped, and you can see the results. It put up some adventitious sprouts that became very weak, and they're already breaking. Some of these are already starting to fail. If they get large and they fail, they can be damaging, especially on big trees like eucalyptus or pine trees. This is overthinning. This is a bad thing. Topping is bad for trees, but so is overthinning. So this tree has obviously been overthinned. This is an African sumac. They do not look like this in nature. This tree has been laced out for the appearance. Whoever the owner is wanted to have a tree that was open and lacy. This is not good for Arizona. This is very hard on trees. You take all the food away, and then you expose the branches to sunlight, and it's very, very hard on them. They take their stored energy to try to replace those leaves, and then you come next year and take them off again. It's very, very, very destructive to trees, and that's one reason why urban trees don't last as long as they should, because arborists are over pruning them. They come back every year and take off more food and throw it away. Real fast about palm trees, we have in our standards, we have verbiage that we are not supposed to take off more than horizontal, the green leaves, but the preference is just to take off the dead leaves that are hanging, and that would retain the yellow leaves that are hanging, because the tree, when they're yellow, the tree is taking nutrients back into so this is a healthy thing for it to yellow like that. And if you can, leave these leaves on until they're brown, and then you can remove them. This tree is very handsome, but there are still tree companies who come in here and remove all these fronds below about well, a lot of them do 10 and 2, or try to hit it 10 and 2. So everything below the 10 and 2 on a clock would be removed. This is such a handsome tree. There should be very little work done. Remove the dead, remove the flowers and the fruit, and leave the foliage. That would be the best thing for this tree. So that's in our standards. We a lot of our arborists, local arborists, don't know that yet. I want to make this let's see, painless as possible. We've always pruned trees to look natural. So in all of my years, I've been working on trees for about 40 years. Until recently, we always tried to go for the natural look, which is what that pine tree in the background is. It's a natural look. It looks like a tree. But we've always had in the landscape, we've always had other pruning methods, other systems is what we call them now, pruning systems. Topiary, pollarding, espalier, and bleaching are systems. They're much different. The tree does not look natural. If you prune a tree, it's going to change its shape. But if you pollard and topiary, it's going to look quite a bit different. So I'm going to go through this real fast, but I just want to let you know that we do have other systems. Almost all of us are going to work with trees. We're going to work with a natural pruning system, and it kind of keeps the shape of the tree, but it does change the appearance. This is the preferred style of pruning for trees. We want them to look like trees. But we do have other ways to prune. This is topiary in the landscape. For the landscape plants, they do this and they make soup cans or beach balls or dolphins or whatever. So that's topiary. We do very formal kind of designs. This is a African sumac. This that is sheared constantly to keep this shape. Topiary can be a very viable system. There is evidence that trees that are handled like this can actually live longer than a tree that is grown naturally. So this kind of work can actually extend the life of some trees. It has to be appropriate for the different species that you're dealing with. One of the things that we know is that if you continually shear it to the same place, the plant becomes very weak. It has a very thin layer of leaves. There's nothing interior because it's shaded, and nothing out exterior because you keep cutting it off, and so it starts starving because there's no light for the inner plant. So we have a process called selective pruning, where we open up portions of the outer canopy to let light in, so that the leaves inside here can have some light. They can feed, and it actually improves the plant without being very unappetizing. Some people don't like to see things like this. They want a nice smooth surface, but these kind of things are actually improving the longevity and the health of the trees. We thought for a long time that native plants wouldn't tolerate shearing, but they do much better. This is a Palo Verde tree, and this is the first photo was taken 10 years before the second. So it's a very viable way to do native trees. I've seen acacias and mesquites and Texas ebony and others handle this kind of shearing very well. Topiary work on desert or some of your Texas Rangers kind of like mandatory, and if it's done correctly and you do the selective pruning, you can have a plant that could be very viable and still provide you with trees. Rejuvenation is, so this is a topiary. These are hedges, and one of the things that the landscaper industry is doing is trying to get away from this kind of plantings, these hedges and so forth, and so they're rejuvenate them. And what that involves is removing a lot of the vegetation down to stubs and then letting them grow back in a natural form, or in this case, they're growing them to be a shorter hedge. So this hedge now is about this high. It was pretty oppressive before, and the homeowners were having issues with feeling, occluded, too much shade. But a lot of the highway plantings and so forth, you'll see they'll come in, they'll renovate them, and then, or sorry, rejuvenate them, and then renovate. Maybe the same kind of process word. Anyway, and then they grow them back as a natural plant. When they get really tall like this again, then they come and cut them down. 5 years or 10 years later, they remove them again, and they bring them back to stubs. And this is an accepted process, and it seems to be working very well for a lot of the plants we have that should not be all that time spent on hedging them and shearing them and then picking up their leaves. Real fast, pollarding is a method of pruning trees to keep them in a certain size space. It was developed in Europe, where they were cosmopolitan long before we were. They don't have room in their little yards with their apartments, so they do pollarding. It doesn't work very well for us here because we have too much sun, but I just wanted to let you know this is one of the accepted systems. Espalier is another one. This is can be very very good process for growing some fruit. So I've seen some peach trees, pear trees that have been done like this, and they're very attractive, and you can grow a lot of fruit on them in a small space. But there again, you don't see this very often. It's very time consuming. So in a small garden, if you like to garden, your garden's not very big, you can spend a lot of time working on an espalier like this. This is pyracantha. It's in the apple family. Apples do very good in this type of system also. This one we hardly ever see. This called pleaching, where they just weave and tie and prune to make shapes like this, chairs, or they make furniture, living furniture, or living objects in the landscape. This is called pleaching, so that's accepted also. I talked earlier about pruning cuts. So these are the four that are accepted in our industry. One's called branch removal, which used to be thinning. One's called reduction, is when you remove the leader and leave a side branch. Another is called heading, and if the branch is small enough, heading is a viable way to prune, and then shearing is for topiary work. So this would be a heading cut. It was just made, and they got sprouts coming off of it. And this would be a reduction cut. So this branch is smaller than the leader that was removed. And then we've got, you don't see it, but there's a thinning cut. There was a branch removal cut here. So most of the work done is, and this tree was in branch removal, but we do have a couple of different types of pruning cuts. Those are the four recognized pruning cuts. I can't think of any others that you could do other than those four. Two heading cuts, the Palo Verde, you can see they were headed. When you head, you don't care where the next branch is. Below that, you just whack it off. The olive tree on the right, this stub actually died. Branch removal cuts, that's thinning. We talked about that a little bit more, but we're getting away from it because most of the arborists, they thin too much and they start stripping out branches, and it's very destructive to do that for trees for a number of reasons, quite a few reasons. Branch removal, or I'm sorry, branch reduction. This branch was reduced here, and you get this weird growth, and then it was reduced here. These are part of the problem with this kind of cuts, is that we have these strange branch architecture, and that's not the greatest thing, but sometimes it's necessary. So these are branch reduction cuts. You want to leave a branch a third of the diameter of the branch you cut off, third to a half. So this should be a third of the branch that you reduce. Should be a third or more of what you reduce. Oh, talking real fast about what's in a tree. The sapwood is what we mostly see. The heartwood is inside that. This is the part that decays. If a tree doesn't have heartwood, you can do heading cuts and not have problem. That's why we do heading cuts on roses. We cut them down every year and it's not really destructive. The problem is when there is heartwood and you do this kind of cut, then you introduce decay here, and when there's heartwood, we call it topping. So that's not the same as just heading. Heading can be a good method, and that's what they do when they do topiary and they do shearing. They're just topping. But when the branch is small enough, they don't get decayed. Decay is a real problem. Well, anytime you make a wound, that's a problem because you could get a disease. But when you open a big one, then you can have decay. Okay. So the phloem is where the sugars go. So the outside of the very edge, just underneath the bark. In fact, they're part of the bark. They're the inner bark, the inside the bark. That's the phloem. And then everything else is the wood, and that's where the waters go. So the water's here, and the sugars are here. Waters go up with nutrients from the ground, and then the sugars go down. Basically, they go in a downward direction to a leaf, or whatever the sink is. And roots are a good sink, so the sugars can go down the roots, and the waters go up into the leaves to be transpired. Real fast about how trees are grow branches and why we don't want to cut into the tree. We want to just cut the branch. So this is a tree. We'll say it 4 years ago. This is how big the branch was, and then the next year it grew. This is the next year's growth, and this is the trunk. So the trunk grew around it. So the branch grows first, then the trunk goes around it, and this is the next year it grows again. So the branch grows, and then the trunk grows around it, and the branch grows, and the trunk goes around it. And this is what we see. This is the branch bark ridge, and this is the collar down here. And this, can you see that, or is it are your faces where I'm pointing? So this is what we see. We see this part. This is the outer bark right here. This is inside the tree. It's been expanded so you can see how it grows. But this is why we want to make sure that we cut it outside the trunk. We don't want to wound the trunk wood. We don't want to, because when we do that, then we can introduce decay. If we cut it here, we just have the problems. The decay problems will be in this part of the tree only. They won't be in the trunk. They'll be only in the branch. And then the tree can stop the decay from going inside and cause it to become weakened. This is the only printing cut I've got. I'm printing diagram I've got for you. And I made a diagram so I'll make sure. Back with the sketch, you can make everything perfect. It's really hard to make a perfect cut. But this is what we would attempt to do all the time when we cut. If the branch is large enough, we'll say 5 inches in diameter. Then you don't want it to, you want to cut it here because then it might rip down the tree. The bark at the bottom might stay attached and it might rip down. We don't want to make a cut that goes up here and then when it comes down, because it leaves a shelf. It's just not, it's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it would be to make a small cut here and then make a deeper cut here. When this branch falls, it won't tear because the tissue's been severed here by your cut. And so the branch will hit here and it will tear to here and then it'll fall off. And then you come in here and make the last cut just outside the branch bark ridge. That's what this is. This is the ridge, and every branch has a ridge. If it's a tree, it has a ridge. But you want to go outside the ridge, so sometimes the cut will be far from this point. Something I learned later in my career is that you go to the outside of the entire ridge, and then you want to go outside the collar. Now, this is because of the sketch, it looks really good. This is hard to find on mesquites and palo verdes, but it's possible. So you want to go outside the collar, and you make the final cut and remove. You don't want to leave a stub, but you don't want to cut into the collar. The collar has special tissues that the cells grow fast to close the vascular system so that diseases can't get in the plant. So it has fast growing cells, and it also has a large amount of chemicals to fight diseases and insects. If you cut it out here and leave a stub, the tree may not know that it's being attacked by a disease or that insects go right past this barrier. But if you cut it here, those chemicals get turned on and they fight off or do a better job of fighting off diseases and insects. The only way you know if you made a good cut, I had to put this in here because one of my clients did that, but it's a cat, by the way. But the way you know you did a good cut is if you have a nice round oval. If the oval is not, I'm sorry, if the wound wood is not the same thickness all the way around, then you've made it, the cut is improper. These are very good cuts. These are extremely good. So they cut just outside the collar and just outside the branch bark ridge, and got these incredibly good wounds closing over. One of the problems we have here is that mesquite trees, I shouldn't say mesquite trees, a lot of our plants have a problem because we make a good cut and we have the tree has problem growing back. So this mesquite tree was pruned correctly. It's hard to see, but this is a correct cut. But it's only got wound wood, a little bit of wound wood on the edge. If this was a sycamore or something, linden tree or something in a different part of the world, you'd have a nice wound wood. You'd have nice callus wood all the way around. You can see there's very little on this side of the tree. It just pulls back. This is what we face in Arizona. The only thing that I know that would improve this. So this cut is probably not the best, but it has died back in enormous amount. And the only thing I know that, this improves this is to prune in cool weather, because it seems to be associated with hot weather and the fact that the vascular system can't hold up. So we don't really know how to do this. A lot of arborists like to prune in the summertime on desert trees, but this is something that we see in trees, African sumac and many other trees will do that. Real fast, so restoration is coming back into vogue, or coming into vogue here. It's been practiced for a long time in Europe, but this tree had a major branch failed and broke another branch. This was left behind. This was the first sprout. I tied it up. This is slack because it really stood up after on its own when it got some light. This branch was I think the first year after this broke. So it was only about 1.5 inches in diameter. This branch is now about 8 inches diameter. This part of the tree was removed, and it looks a lot better. So this tree could be restored, some of these branches. So this one is restoring itself. It's a broken branch. And for decades, I would remove all these branches because it's better to remove them. Well, now we know that we can let them regrow, and all old trees, I'm gonna say all of them, but all old trees have decay. So the decay may have come in through this very good pruning wound. So if I remove this to try to keep decay off, this is a big stub. That's about 1 foot across. That's a big wound. So if it's going to get decay, why don't you let it have branches too? And so that's what they do in the forest. They live for hundreds of years. So we're trying to emulate some of the things that we've been staying away from in the past. I'm going to skip this. This talks about how trees fight decay. This wall 1 is where the vessels and the decay goes up and down. Wall 2 is decay goes into the tree. Wall 3 comes around the tree, and wall 4 is the new wood. I'm going to skip that because we're kind of running out of time. This is another, and this is important because decay is really important for us. But wall 1 is up and down, so we can't show it's in a radial cut. Wall 2 is going in. You can see the decay is starting to penetrate a little bit. It should look more like that. Wall 3, it goes around and is holding very well. And then wall 4 is the new wood. So the tree has grown over the old wound. A couple of years of new growth. This is the wall 4. So that's what trees do to protect themselves from decay. They just kind of compartmentalize it. They hold it inside. Keep in mind that decay is present in all old trees. If you see this, you know there's decay. This is an old cottonwood tree in San Pedro region, and So, but again, almost, I'm gonna say all old trees. I don't know for sure. I can't say that for sure, but I'm gonna say all old trees have decay, but they don't all fall down. And a lot of trees that don't have decay do. So that doesn't mean that you have to get rid of a tree because it's got decay. It just means you have to manage it differently. That pretty much does it, Mary Beth. And I got maybe a little bit time for questions. I'm not sure.
Sure. We did have a few questions in the chat. Several of them you answered already, so that was great. So one question is, do you recommend reduction pruning on shrubs as well as trees? And if so, does the ring at the point of branching mean the same thing on a shrub as it does on a tree?
Okay, so yes, they're just like trees. They're like they're like a multi-trunk tree. So, and it does work on them. That's what the rejuvenation process is a extreme form of reduction, because they don't leave any leaves. The tree has to replace all the leaves and all the branches. So, but that is a form of reduction cutting.
Okay.
And it's also a topping cuts because they cut through those branches. They don't really care where they're cutting. And there will be the same kind of growth. You won't see those rings as prominent because some trees do that better than others. And those soft bark trees like aspen and maples and so forth do that a lot better than our native trees. So if you do that to a Texas Ranger, you're probably not going to see those rings, but you're not going to care because all the growth's going to grow up around it if you do rejuvenation. Yeah.
Okay. Claudia asks, how do you know when to remove the temporary branches?
Good question. You want to make all your cuts small. So I try in my practice not to cut any branches bigger than 4 inches. I wouldn't want any temporaries to get even close to that. So they all grow at different rates, but I would say that if you want to cut them before they develop heartwood, absolutely. But you could cut them when they're finger size, like a small finger, or like thumb size would probably be the largest temporary branch you would want to have. Some of their sprouts, okay, so in the canopy, there are sprouts. And one of the things we do to make the tree prettier is to clean the sprouts out of crotches of the trees, out of the unions. And some of those can be fairly large. And but there's no real perfect time to do it. It's just that when it becomes, we don't want them to get too large. So on the bottom part of the trunk, below the first permanent branch, you don't want to get them very large. And when I say that, I'm talking seriously like little finger size or thumb size diameter. That would be probably where you'd want to cut them.
Okay, great. So those were the 2 questions we had in chat. I think Moye, you asked a question about dollar value, but I think that was answered by that tree benefits calculator. I don't know if there was anything else about that you wanted to ask. Okay, maybe not, but does anyone else have questions that you'd like to ask Juan? Well, I'd just like to say, while people are gathering their questions, this has just been great information and I learned a ton. I feel like I want to go do research now and learn even more. So I really appreciate all that you've shared with us.
It's a tip of the iceberg, Mary Beth, and I rushed through it really fast. I apologize, but you've got the information. You can go back over it and then do some research on your own and probably get more out of this.
Right. That's great. And I know you left your email. Is that, can people get in touch with you that way?
Yes.
Gmail. I'll put that in the chat too for folks in case they.
Email and text are a good way. I'm real bad with phones, so sorry. Yeah, but yeah, if they want to email me and I can answer some basic questions. I'm not like extension, so I have trouble discerning answers from photographs. They do much better at that because they see it all the time. I don't always do that well, but I'll help if I can.
That's great.
Mary Beth, I do have a question.
Sure.
What about coating the cuts, putting something on them?
Oh, very good question. No.
Okay.
they still sell the product. It's asphalt, and it's a great idea, but it just doesn't work. Fungus is the problem. Fungus causes decay. If you make a cut, I've heard some pathologists say if you got about 3 seconds to cover up a cut to keep the spores off it, they're going to cause diseases and decay. You got about 3 seconds. So first of all, you're late. The second thing is after the spores fall on there, fungus likes 3 things really well. They like things that are dark, and that's what asphalt is. They like things that are warm, and that's what asphalt is. And they like things that are moist. And when you cover up that thing, then you keep the tree moist. So it's really bad to do that. The best thing, and I've looked at this, I haven't looked at it recently, but I've looked at it over the years about trying to find something. I know something that could work, but it's not offered commercially, so you can't buy it. But the best thing is to leave it out in the open, let the tree wound dry out and be in the sun. That's the best thing you can do for it.
Great. So Juan, could you stop sharing your screen, and then I think we can see people's faces a little better, and that might be helpful. There should be a you should be able to just click on the screen, I think. And there was another question from Claudia that said, how do you know the difference between co-dominant and multi-branches?
Oh, okay. So co-dominant just means that they're the same size. Okay, stop. There we go. Okay.
Perfect, thanks.
So co-dominant means they're the same size. So a lot of shrubs have branches, they have a lot of canes that are the same size. But if they don't become long and they support themselves, so you have it's like a forest. So forests don't fall down. It's just the edge of the forest that falls down. So a shrub doesn't lose branches like trees do because they're supporting each other. But co-dominance means they're the same size. So if they're the same size and close together, oh, you probably can't see me, can you? Well, why can't you see me? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so if they're close together and the same size, then that's very bad. If they're the same size and there's a wide angle, then that's not so bad. If they're close together but different sizes, that's not much of a problem either. It's when they're the same size and close together, and because they get so large, they'll push each other off, but they'll push one of them off. There's not enough room so they start out they're only the size of 2 fingers, but then by the time they're the size of 2 large legs, then there's no room for all of them, so they get pushed off. That doesn't happen with shrubs.
Great.
For the most part.
Juan, I have a question for you. And this is Marty. And I have a question for you is what causes mesquite trees to weep? And what can you do to prevent it?
There's no prevention. It's called wetwood. And it's in most trees, it's caused by a colony of different bacteria, maybe 5 or 6 bacteria go in there. With the mesquite trees, I understand there's only one bacteria that does it, but what they do is they're eating the chemicals that trees put in the heartwood to fight fungus. Bacteria are not fungus. They eat the fungicides, and when they eat, they off-gas. Anything that's alive off-gases, plants and humans, and so bacteria as well. So the off-gas, the pressure from the off-gas ruptures plant cells, and then the sap oozes out. There is no way to stop it because you can't put a pesticide in, or a bactericide in there that goes up and down the column of the heartwood, because heartwood doesn't move that stuff. It would move in the vascular system, but then that's not where the bacteria are. So there's no way to stop it. There are things that we do. We wrap it to try to slow down the ooze. Some people put, some of my clients have buckets in their tree, like maple buckets, and they catch the stuff and then occasionally they just dump it out. So, but there's no way to stop it. With some other trees like cottonwoods and willows and so forth, there's things that we can do that will help. But with mesquites, no, nothing.
Yeah.
Does it harm the mesquite? or,
Not really. Again, they're eating chemicals, and the tree puts them there. So they're eating chemicals. They're not really eating the tree. They don't care about the cells. But the problem is that over time they can rupture enough cells that it kind of weakens them. It's kind of but trees don't just fall over all the time. So it's a minor thing, but it is a little bit of a problem. But what it really is cosmetic, because it's really bad on when it drips on your cars or your pavement. It's really bad. So it's nasty stuff, but it's cosmetic. But it's that doesn't mean we have to like it. That's for sure. With a lot of trees, if I can, I just remove the branches that's oozing back to a point where the ooze will now fall into dirt. And if I can't do that, then I just say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do, because if I can get it printed back so the ooze falls in the dirt, then it's not as big of an issue. But it goes into the roots and everything. I mean, that bacteria goes everywhere there's heartwood, and there's heartwood in roots. So it's underground black stuff coming out.
wow. Okay, any other questions?
have-
Oh, Marty.
Oh, I have another question about the mistletoe. And like how much is acceptable or tolerable before it gets damaging? And how do you know, kind of like, we have trees that have mistletoe in it and it doesn't seem to be a bother. And then all of a sudden, I don't want to have a dead tree.
Yeah. So if you leave it alone, okay, so mistletoe likes certain plants better than others. It's spread by birds. And mistletoe is a plant. It's not a fungus. It's not a disease. It's not a bacteria. It's a plant. It's an aerophyte. It grows in trees, but it makes roots in the trees. So that's the part that's really hard to draw a line. If you have mistletoe growing on a small branch, so a branch the size of your thumb or maybe your wrist, that size branch, it's far from the main trunk, then those roots have to grow a long way before they do anything. But the roots are kind of like Bermuda grass roots. They can sprout further down the trunk. So but if the seeds fall on the big wood, the leaders, the scaffold branches, and they get into the main part of the tree, then the roots will be in the main part of your tree, and then they can sprout out lower down or farther up, and that's when it becomes problematic. Mistletoe is a very benign disease. It takes decades. I've got mesquite trees near me that have had mistletoe for about 30 years, and they are now dying, and seriously dying, but they're loaded with mistletoe. So for the most part, if you have a mesquite tree and you keep the mistletoe, off the trunks. Whenever you see it on the trunk, knock it off. Then you can have a tree to live for 80, 90 years with mistletoe. If you have a clump that grows on a small branch the size of your wrist and they become very large, they might break it, but they're not going to be as destructive as on the trunk. We don't have any chemicals really that work very well. We have, so nothing works better than just cutting the branch off, or else pushing the mistletoe so it breaks off and falls out. But I've had, on some of the trees I've had to work on, the mistletoe is actually all the way to the ground. It is right at seriously, an inch off the ground, mistletoe stems are coming out. So it's very invasive. Oh, okay. So let me just say, it's not as bad on native mesquite as it is on the South American mesquites, and it's not as bad on mesquites as it is on our acacias, or what we used to call acacias. So keep it out of your acacias if you can, but go after it. Don't dally. I have taken it out of my acacias. I moved into my house with mistletoe, and I took it out, and I have acacias, but I'm the only one I know that has done that. So it's a lot of work. But acacias, you don't want to leave it at all. None, zero.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, let's all thank Juan so much. This has been really fantastic. Thank you, Juan. Thanks so much for the great presentation.
My pleasure. And write me if you have another question, if something pops up. I'd be glad to hear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so
Thank
much.
so much.
Happy
Juan.
holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get off. Bye now.
Bye
Bye
now.
now.
Take care.
Thanks again.
Happy New Year.
Does anybody have any other just straight gardening questions or issues that you're?
Somebody had a question about cardoons. Was that you, Melody? Does anyone know any? I don't remember what it was. I'm sorry. So if you want to say it again. You're muted. Sorry. There you go.
Okay, so I've read that to prepare cardoon for eating, before it gets too large, you're supposed to gather all the leaves together and tie burlap or newspaper or something around it to blanch the leaves. You eat the inner stem, you eat the stems basically of cardoon. So that makes it less fibrous. And I have 3-year-old cardoon plants. I just do not know how to harvest them. So I was just hoping somebody has had experience with blanching cardoon. Nobody. Okay. Okay, because what I've read is to do it in the fall, but that doesn't apply to Tucson because they're practically dead in the fall and then they start growing again in the fall. So I just don't know when to do it in Tucson.
I have a question, Melody. I don't know what cardoons are or what they look like, or
Okay.
I know this much about them. 0.
Okay. Cardoon is a relative of artichoke. The plants look almost exactly like artichoke, but they do not get the big flower bud, which is what you eat in an artichoke. Instead, you eat the leaf ribs, the white rib on the leaf. And it's supposed to taste like artichoke and have the same great nutritional profile of artichoke, but you don't have to scrape off little bits with your teeth. And it's usually used in stews in Italy, and the French I think eat cardoon. I think it's grown a lot in southern France for the flower trade because if you don't harvest it, it will get the big beautiful thistle-like flower, which is used in the flower trade in Europe. But that's what I know about cardoon, and I have these wonderful plants, but I just don't know how to harvest them.
Thank you. Well,
Melody, I found a web page and I put the link in the chat, and it's just about growing cardoons and preparing them. It says you blanch them for like 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know if you could write to them and ask them what it would be like. You know who might know? I've been reading this Growing in the Garden blog. There's a woman in Phoenix.
Right.
She grows all kinds of interesting vegetables. She might be worth writing to ask that question.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I think they grow it at Mission Garden.
Oh,
And I did ask that question. I didn't ask about blanching, but they said you're supposed to harvest it in the spring. But when's the spring in Tucson? Is it February 1st? I don't
take
know when
your pick.
spring is.
That's another question, a really good question. Wow. Well, keep us posted if you find out some answers. That's a great question.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or? Barbara Kane is going to sleep, so that means it's time for us to all say goodbye. Nighty night, Barbara.
We'll see you next month. Happy holidays and
Thanks,
best
everybody.
in the new year to everyone.
Thanks, Marty. You too.
Happy holidays. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye.